Welcome, everyone, to the Northeast Indiana Basketball Summit. I'm your host, Ben Smith, joined by my co-host, Jeff Metzger. Before introducing our guest, we want to thank Feel for the Game for providing the platform to have all these presentations live and available for replay. You can check out all the resources over at feelforthegame.com. Our guest today is Taylor Ware. He is the founder and director of player development at Competitive Greatness. He is also the head boys basketball coach at his alma mater, Bishop Chatard High School in Indianapolis. Coach, talk to me a little bit about Competitive Greatness and the Pyramid of Success before we get into your topic.
Yeah, so I after I graduated from Indiana University, I started training a few athletes here and there. Was kind of doing it more of a hobby than anything else as I was working full time. And a few years later, we had grown a bunch, and so I started a business. And when I was thinking about what the best way to name the business would be, and kind of put a lot of thought into that, I've always been a big John Wooden study a lot of coaches. So on John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, obviously one of the cornerstones is competitive greatness. And for him, it's being at your best when your best is needed. So kind of our thought was, we're preparing these athletes not just to be at their best when their best is needed them, but just to be at their best all the time. And, we're firm believers as coaches, as trainers, that, we've got to bring our best every day if we're going to expect that of those guys. And so for us, it was kind of the perfect name, and obviously has been something that has really clicked with a lot of our athletes and has been a big part of the message that we spread to those guys, every single time we're in the gym with them.
I thought it was perfect timing because yesterday we had John Plefka on, and he gave us a quote, from Bobby Knight about discipline, very much similar to the competitive greatness as far as doing it every single time, to the best of your ability. So
Sure.
My co-host here is Jeff. So Jeff, do you have any opening comments?
I don't. I'm looking forward to this, though.
Awesome. Cool. So I know we're going to be talking mentality, tactics, and stuff. So whatever you want to go ahead.
Yeah. So I know we were going to touch on player development a little bit, and I'm going to start by kind of just saying, for me, and I've had a lot of different conversations. I've been around a lot of high-level athletes, was very blessed, obviously, to play at Indiana University with guys like Victor Oladipo, who've become NBA All-Stars and, have gotten to see firsthand how important that mindset and mentality actually is. And I'm a firm believer, I'll get into that here in a little bit, but I think you can train your mind, your toughness. I'll kind of coin the term grit because I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but I think you can train those things and develop those things just as much as your ball handling and your shooting. And so, from our standpoint, going right along those lines, you hear the term skill development thrown out there a lot. We've always talked about player development. So a piece of that is your skills, but we're trying to really develop the player as a whole. And a huge piece of that is what things look like between the ears. And so it's not an easy thing to train, but again, it's something that I've considered extremely important over the course of my coaching career, over the course of the guys that I've trained, guys and girls. And it's something that I think, everybody can learn those drills and those different concepts. There's a plethora of stuff all over YouTube, on all the social media platforms on, different drills that you can do with athletes. But, I've always kind of said, if I'm trainer A and trainer B is across the street training athletes, he or she might have technically better drills than me. I've got to have good stuff. I got to have good drills and concepts. But, if I can get my athletes to go at those drills at a higher effort level and to have a higher level of focus and to understand, why we're doing that stuff, my athletes are going to get exponentially better than his or hers are going to get. And I really believe that. So, from a technical player development standpoint, a lot of people like to focus on, like, what are my weaknesses? What do I need to improve on? And don't get me wrong, that's a huge piece of it. But we also like to think about, like, if you're really good at something, so like Steph Curry, for example, he's an elite level shooter, one of the best in the world. He's extremely dangerous with that, but he's going to continue to work on how he can be more dangerous as a shooter and how he can be even greater at that skill. And I think that's a huge piece of player development that sometimes doesn't get discussed as much as it should. Is you want to work on your weaknesses, you want to get better at the things you need to improve on, but you cannot neglect the stuff that makes you great. So the things you're really good at already, you want to be even greater at. That's, in my mind, that along with, the things that happen a lot on the court, I guess is the way that I would put it. So you want to be great at the things you're already good at. You still want to work on those weaknesses, but you also want to be great at the things that happen a lot. So for a lot of athletes, obviously it's being able to catch and shoot, especially if you're in a certain role where that's kind of what you're supposed to do, is you're supposed to be a catch and shoot type of player. You know, those different roles kind of depend on your current scenario, your current team, and what your coach is asking of you. And I always use the 80-20 rule. So regardless of if I'm working with a middle schooler or a professional athlete that's trying to make it at the NBA level, you know, we use the 80-20 rule, meaning like 80% of the stuff we do is going to be so you can maximize your role right now. So you don't always get to dictate your role, but you can't fight your coach on it. You can work towards a greater role, which is where the 20% comes in, and I'll get to that in a second. But like 80% of our skill work, our player development work, is to get better at what you're going to have to do in your current role, in your current situation. 20% is going to be working on the things you'd like to be, or the role that you would like to be, I guess is the way that I would put it. So that's kind of the way that we always look at player development. Every player is different, obviously. So, you know, for example, if we've got an NBA pre-draft guy or somebody that's trying to play professionally overseas, but particularly the NBA, you hear about like that 3-and-D type of player. Unless you're a lottery pick, and even a lot of the lottery picks have to start in a certain role, but if you're trying to make an NBA roster, your role's really going to be like a 3-and-D type scenario, or maybe you're a good rebounder, but you're not going to be working on all this isolation stuff. You're not even going to be allowed to do a lot of that. You know, you're going to be spotting up in the corners, on the wings, and you got to defend. And so, again, 80% of our work is going to be able to maximize what that role hopefully is going to look like. And then again, the other 20% you can work on maybe some of those isolation situations, some of the things that you'd like to work into as you build your career. You know, same thing, like it's a little bit more prevalent at the high school level, even in college, not as much anymore. In the NBA, you do a lot of stuff in the pinch post, but, you know, in the AAU scene, the high school scene, especially middle school with bigger kids, you see kids posting up on the block. And again, we all know the game is changing, so you've got to use that 20% for a post guy to work on the stuff that you know he's going to need to get better at for his future down the road. But if he's a true post player in his current role, you need to be working on some of that stuff too. So very generally speaking, you know, that's what we look at from a player development standpoint. And, you know, on top of all those different things, you know, Phil Beckner's a really good high-level player development guy. He's worked with Damian Lillard. I've studied him along with a lot of other people. But, like, we talk about what are some things that you have to have in your arsenal, really no matter what your role is. So what can be part of kind of that 80%, regardless of what you're doing on your team currently. And he kind of calls it, what are the absolutes that you're going to have in pretty much every workout. And so for us, it boils down to ball handling, pace and tempo, which is like deceiving defenders, using your change of speed. You know, pace and tempo changes, it can be kind of raising your body. There's a lot of different ways to get into it, but we kind of talk about pace and tempo as something that we work on a ton of. Footwork would be another big one for us. So, you know, it could be rips, it could be jab steps, it could be, you know, the way that you step into your ball handling moves. It could be your footwork on the catch and shoot jump shots. Obviously, people are teaching those things different ways nowadays, but footwork is a huge piece of what we work on, regardless of what your role is. Another one would be finishing around the rim. Again, I use the word deception all the time. You've got to be able to deceive defenders. You know, for me as a player, I was 5'11", trying to go finish at the rim against guys like Cody Zeller when I got to college, but even in high school, middle school, I was never a guy that could go finish over the top of taller defenders necessarily. I had to figure out how to deceive them. We also talk about a lot of initiating contact. If you are a smaller player, or even if you're not, if you can initiate contact, you can take away some of that athleticism, you know, change of direction on your finishes, all those different things we kind of loop into that category of finishing, obviously mostly around the rim. And obviously a big one is shooting. Shooting is always going to be something that you need to have, something that can put you in a different level depending on how well you can stretch the floor. And obviously a lot of that can get into the nitty gritty of the footwork, of the different cuts you'll make on the floor, spot ups on the move, off the bounce. Shooting in general is a huge piece, obviously, of everything that we do. And we talk a lot about, from a technicality standpoint, like momentum and balance. So you see off balance jump shots, fadeaway jump shots all the time. But at that level, that NBA level where you see a lot of that stuff, those guys actually are still on balance a lot of times when they are fading away from the basket. The way that they land, you can see that most of the time they truly are on balance, even if they're fading away from the basket as they shoot it. And so, again, we talk about momentum and balance from the standpoint of, like, the more momentum and energy that you can get towards the rim, the more consistent you're going to be with your jump shot. So, from your footwork all the way through your follow through, that's how you generate your power. Anything that goes away from the rim is going to cause you to make those jump shots at a lower percentage. So that's a big thing for our athletes, whether it's spot up, whether it's on the move, is that we want to get all of our momentum towards the rim from footwork to follow through. And then we want to make sure that we're on balance for the most part. So another big thing we do with shooting, kind of to touch on that one more time, is we like to put pressure on our jump shots. We like to put pressure on these drills. So we'll do a lot of things where we, sometimes we do streak shooting where, you stay in the same spot until you miss. It could be the very first shot that you take. It could be you make 10 in a row and you miss the 11th and then you move spots. It puts pressure on each shot, and it kind of teaches you to treat every shot the same. Same thing with, sometimes we'll make 2 in a row. Sometimes we'll make 3 in a row. We might, you got to make 3 before you miss 2. There's a lot of different variations that we do on top of just a certain number of makes that put pressure and kind of train your mind just as much as your jump shot, within a workout. So we don't do a whole lot of stuff just to get a certain number of shots up. We always do it to make a certain number of shots. And I think that's a really important thing for athletes to think about, is you're going to the gym to make shots. You can go in and get 1,000 shots up. If you're not making very many of them, you're probably not getting a whole lot better. You need to go in there with the mindset and the mentality that you're going to make a certain number of jump shots in whatever it is that you do. So, from that standpoint, there's different kinds of player development workouts that we do. The main one that we do all the time is, again, like what we consider a player development workout, and I'll get into the details of that. The differences that you kind of have sometimes in these different workouts would be, you can have, what we would call like a shooting workout where the emphasis is just strictly on jump shots. And that's different than getting shots up. Those are kind of two different things that we differentiate. Is like, if you're going to the gym just to get some shots up, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to make 400 shots today. That's just going to the gym, maybe getting on the gun, getting shots up. If we're doing a shooting workout, we're going full speed, we're making game-like cuts. We still may be doing spot up, catch and shoot jump shots, but it is game-like. You're still breaking a sweat. You're still getting that heart rate up. It is a shooting workout versus, again, just going in the gym maybe by yourself or with a rebounder and getting a certain number of makes up. The other thing that we do is like breakdown workouts. And again, this is coined by a couple different trainers, but when we do a player development workout, it is high intensity, fast pace. And again, I'll get back to that in a second. But from a breakdown standpoint, that's when we're taking more time to coach and explain the technique of each thing we're working on, maybe each move we're working on, maybe we're working on side ball screen actions. And we really take the time to break down this piece of what we're doing. There's a lot more stoppage in between. There's a lot more conversation back and forth, and you're really working on the fine, minute details of the skill that you're working on. The majority of our workouts are, again, what I would call like a player development workout, where we're not just working on, this specific skill. We are working on the pace. So you're working on your conditioning. You're also building kind of your mentality and your toughness, where we don't ever let guys walk around in a workout. Again, in a breakdown workout, maybe you're walking from spot to spot as you talk. In a player development workout, you might coach them up on the fly as they're maybe jogging to the next rep, but there's not a whole lot of stoppage. It's about getting good reps up. It's still paying attention to detail, but the pace of everything, building that mental toughness, is a major part of what we're trying to do in those player development workouts. And I think another, big part of what we're trying to do there is everything matters. So I think a lot of athletes struggle with, if let's say we're doing a drill where there's 3 athletes in the drill, one person's shooting, getting through whatever shooting piece we're doing. There's a passer and there's a rebounder. We do a lot of that. So you got 2 basketballs rotating. We also do partner shooting. It's the same concept if you're partner shooting, where it's 1 rebounder and 1 shooter. If you're the passer in that drill, you are not passively passing the ball. So I see this all the time, especially at the youth age level. It drives me nuts. Kids just kind of throwing the ball all over the place. The pass isn't on target. They're not stepping into it like they would in a game. And you're not getting better. You're wasting those valuable reps. That's a spot that we are working on passing, because passing, obviously, as we all know, is just as much a skill as anything else that you're doing in that drill. So you're stepping into it, making it game-like. Maybe you're working on skip passes, but you're putting the ball on target every time. And I tell our athletes, when I was at IU, Jordan Holes is one of the best shooters that I've ever been around, still to this day. And I'll never forget, we had a treadmill in the corner of the gym, And anytime the ball was not put right in his shooting pocket, even if it was a couple inches off of the target, Coach Crean had us over on the treadmill sprinting until he told you to stop, and then you're back in the drill. That's the importance that we put on passing. And again, it needs to be that way all the time, because how you do anything is how you do everything. If you're not working on being sharp with your passing, you're never going to get better at it. And then the same thing with rebounding. If you're the rebounder, our rule of thumb is the ball's not going to bounce more than once. So I love the fact, I know we've all been watching the Jordan documentary series. I loved when Rodman talked about how he used to have, his buddies throw the ball up off the backboard or shoot it, and he tried to track it off the rim and get better at rebounding. Rebounding is a skill just like anything else. Everybody wants to talk about how he has a nose for the ball. What that really means is he knows how to read the ball off the rim better than others. And so, for us, again, if the ball bounces more than once, meaning you've got to try to read it off the rim, you're not always going to be right. But if you're trying to figure out where it's going, you can get to it a little bit quicker. And even on long rebounds, we're sprinting to go get it, getting the rebound. And again, you're putting that pass on target wherever it's going. We ran a lot of sprints this year in my Chatard program, because anytime we did a drill that was a shooting drill, or anytime there was an opportunity to work on our rebounding, if that ball bounced more than once, every single time it did, our coaches tracked that, and then we ran for it at the end of it. And again, it helped us hold each other accountable. And you wouldn't believe how by the end of the season, it looked drastically different than it did at the beginning of the year, and it helped us be better rebounders. But it also it helps you get more out of each drill. Your partner or your teammate, if there's 3 of you, he's going to get more shots up. He or she's going to get more attempts up, more reps. And so you're looking out for your teammate too. You're really doing the work for them to get them extra shots, and it builds kind of that team chemistry, that team culture of everything too. So like I said, really we focus on the effort level, the pace, the attention to detail. And obviously there's different things we work on in those skill development workouts. But, the player development side of what we do, when you're looking at those 4 different types of workouts, if you're doing a player development workout, those things have to be in place, and those things have to be a huge part of what you're doing. And the last thing from the technical piece of it, before I kind of get into the more mentality mindset side of things, from a strictly structuring standpoint for our player development workouts, we always try to work from the inside out. So, I'm sure a lot of you do this too, but form shooting is always first and foremost what we do. So if you come into the gym with me for a skill development, player development workout, you automatically form shoot. So the guys that have worked with me, guys and girls for a long time, they know even if I'm finishing up another workout while they're in the gym, they get their stretch in, they get warmed up, and then they immediately form shoot. So you work your way out with the form shooting, but we also do that once we actually get into the workout piece of all of it. So we almost always start with ball handling, and it's usually on the move. There's obviously a time and place for stationary ball handling, and sometimes that's part of the warm-up. But I also believe that's something that you can do at home anywhere with space. So we give a lot of our athletes those stationary ball handling drills they can do on their own. Like I said, every once in a while we'll throw those in, but we try to do the same sort of ball handling on the move, whether it's singles, combo moves, triples. Really, we don't ever do any more than 3 at one time, just because if you can get that single move or a combo move to counter it really sharp, you become really, really hard to guard. And if you can maximize your effort level on those, you're going to start to master some of those skills. So we usually go ball handling into finishing at the rim. Then we kind of start working our way out with ball handling into pull-ups. And then we work our way back out to the 3-point line, and the workout kind of goes from there. But again, I always feel like, even from a confidence standpoint, going to the mentality mindset, as the athlete starts to see the ball go through the rim, as they start to get warmed up, it's the same idea with form shooting. They start to work their way out. You don't need to start launching threes at the beginning of a workout. It's going to make you more successful as a jump shooter if you do it that way. It's also a great way to kind of get your legs underneath you to start a workout and get into it that way. So again, going back to what I said at the beginning, and this is where I'm going to kind of stay the rest of, this presentation, is the mindset, mentality, and player development is extremely, extremely important. Like I said, everybody can have drills, that they find on YouTube. Everybody can learn different drills, go to different college, professional practices, high school practices. I'm a firm believer we can all keep learning, but a huge piece of it is what can you get your players to do within those drills? How hard can you get them to work? How much can you get them to focus? How much can you motivate them or inspire them? And a big thing for me is, motivation versus inspiration. And this is kind of how I've always described the difference. And I think it's a huge piece of success at any level of coaching or training, however you want to describe it. motivation would be like, I feel like I'm motivating athletes when we're in the gym together. So I can motivate Johnny to work harder in this ball handling drill by kind of barking at him, talking to him, telling him that he needs to work harder. I can motivate him to work harder and to do things a little bit differently. Inspiration is I'm inspiring him to now go do it on his own. So, I don't have a ton of access every single day, especially to like high school athletes, middle school athletes. When we have our college and pro guys home for the summer, we get a little bit more access to them, 5, 6, even sometimes 7 days a week. But if I can inspire those athletes, even if let's say they are working out with me 6, 7 days a week, they may be at home and they're inspired to go out and do stuff on their own. I've had a couple pro guys stay with me, and I'm lucky enough to, at the apartment complex I live at, have a half court gym in the clubhouse. It's part of why I live here. But I've had guys who we've worked out once, maybe even twice, and now they're watching a motivational video, or for whatever reason they decide it wasn't planned, but they want to go work out again. I mean, I've had pro guys text me, even though we're living in the same apartment complex. I've had them text me and say at 11 p.m. like, hey, can we go get another workout in? And that's the inspiration that I think we can try to really push our athletes with. There's no science to it. There's no blueprint for being able to inspire athletes. But if you can inspire athletes to want to continue to get better on their own and do those different things, especially now with these unprecedented times, it's really hard to be on these Zoom video calls and not be in person with our athletes and not be able to motivate them in person. It's tough on us, and we've got to be able to inspire them from a distance and do things that way. And so, I really do believe, and I've believed it my whole career, that toughness, effort, mindset, mentality, and grit can be trained just like anything else. You can train your ball handling, you can train your shooting to get better at that. I think you can also train those different skills just like anything else. And I think the more that we can make sure our athletes know that too, the better off they're going to be at those things. And one of the ways that we do that, again, because there's not an exact science to it, but one of the ways we do it is allowing for mistakes, but holding athletes to an extremely high accountability level with the effort, the focus, and their intent in every workout, every practice that they're in. So, I tell athletes sometimes everybody comes in with a varying degree of skill, talent level, where they're at on that spectrum of things. You might have to mess up this ball handling drill that's a little more advanced than where you're at 100 times. All I'm going to ask you to do is do it as hard as you possibly can. Focus on it, have great intent with it. I'm not worried about the mistakes. You're probably going to make mistakes, but if you can do it at a high effort level versus making yourself comfortable, and then after 100 times of messing it up, get better at it and improve upon it, that's going to make you a lot better than just going through the motions and just being inside your comfort zone the whole time. And so, I guess one of the ways that I'll leave all of you with kind of a way to think about that is, I don't know how many of you have seen the Grit TED Talk by Angela Duckworth. It's only 6-7 minutes long. It's a really powerful concept, and it's a way that I've always tried to look at different training and different mindset motivation tactics. Is, she kind of talks about it from an educational standpoint, from the sense of they've got, certain high IQ levels, obviously, that different people have, as students, whether it's a elementary school, middle school, high school student, college student, everybody's got a different IQ level. And for us, we look at things from a talent skill perspective. So IQ is really the only way that you can measure intelligence as far as that goes from, a student's perspective. For us, we can measure shooting percentage, we can measure ball handling, quick hands, we can measure, a lot of different things as far as vertical jump, 40-yard dash, speed, all that kind of stuff. What we can't always measure is grit. That's a harder thing to measure. The toughness, the mentality is a harder thing to measure, but it's something that we can try to really understand better. And so the way that she describes grit is passion and perseverance for long-term goals. And so a lot of it has to do with sticking with your future, kind of looking at your long-term goals and figuring out how I can persevere and get over some of these failures that I'm dealing with. And again, not always looking at things as having to be perfect, but, making sure that we're treating our lives and our goals and our current situation as a marathon versus a sprint. And so, a good example for us would be an athlete's not going to go from shooting 30% to 40% from 3 overnight. It's just not going to happen. And I've always looked at it as like, let's try to get you to 31 or 32. Let's make this a more realistic goal. And let's look at that 40% goal, that more long-term goal, as something that we're really going to have to stick with. We're really going to have to persevere with. And so, that's a way for us to look at how we can mentally help our athletes be grittier, be tougher, have a focus on their mindset and their mentality just as much as anything else. And I really do believe, you should never let anybody give less effort, give less focus, or not have a certain intent on what they're doing. That's always got to be at an extremely high accountability level. But I do think allowing, like in specific skill scenarios, allowing for mistakes to happen and allowing them to understand that, failure is not a permanent condition, and failure is something that we can all learn from. And I'm a true believer that failure is something that can benefit us in the long run. If you do everything right over the course of your life, you never deal with adversity, you're really not going to be able to build that tough mentality because you've gotten over that stuff and you can get over that stuff. So, even though we know very little about grit and mindset coaching and mentality coaching, there's different things out there. There's different ways that we can learn about it. But, I guess the main thing that she kind of ends her talk with, and the main thing that I always talk about, is just making sure our athletes have that growth mindset. And there's a lot of different talks about growth mindset as well, but just helping athletes learn that we don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfect, but their effort level, their focus, and their intent has to be at lead all the time. And Corey Barnett's a very good friend of mine. He's an assistant coach at Nevada under Steve Alford. He played with me at IU. He was at UCLA previously to that. And in a recent podcast with him, he had a great take on, kind of how we're all presented with events, responses, and outcomes. And so even with this pandemic right now, this is an event that we had no control over. We don't have control over the event. We do have control over the response to an event. And if we can respond the right way and grow from it, then we have control over the outcome. But that event that happens to us, whether it's within a workout, within a season, something in our lives outside of basketball, that event itself, we have no control over. We do have control over our response to each individual rep, each individual drill, practice, game, season. Our response is ultimately going to determine that outcome. And I think the more that we can help our athletes understand that, the more often that we're going to have them build tougher mindsets, be grittier, and be able to fight through the adversity that we all know they're going to be presented with in basketball and in life. So, that's kind of my, I guess, synopsis on how we view all that different stuff, how we kind of go about, again, our player development. I do truly believe, and this is probably the main point I would make, and I know a lot of you believe this out there too, but your mindset, your grit, your mentality, your toughness, our athletes being able to focus on all that stuff and help them understand that that's just as much a skill as anything else we're going to work on. The more I think we can do that, the more exponential our results are going to be when we're focusing on development.
Oh, sorry. Here I am. Writing notes down. Trying to get my buddy Jeff on here. I usually let him fire away first. Oh, good.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Hey, I like it. I just want to know, from a coaching standpoint, what is the biggest thing you think a young coach should have, like as a quality or how they coach?
Yeah. I think it goes back to what I touched on at the end, kind of having a growth mindset. Regardless of your age, we all need to be learning. We all need to be improving. And I think the more that we can show our athletes that we're trying to do that, the more we can show our athletes that we're putting in a ton of effort, the more they're going to reciprocate that. And, again, Jordan had a great quote at the end of one of those episodes last week saying, he would never ask his teammates to do anything that he wouldn't do. And so that's, I think, a huge way to get your players to play at a higher effort level, to give you a ton of effort and focus, is you got to be that way all the time too. And I know not everybody's perfect. Just like I said, perfection's never attainable, but that's a huge piece to me, is just being able to get your athletes to understand that you're never going to ask them to do something that you wouldn't do yourself, and just continuing to grow on a regular basis and showing them that you're committed to your growth, so they need to be committed to theirs too.
Okay. Ben, do you have anything else?
So the TED Talk was Grit by Angela Duckworth.
Angela Duckworth. Yep, Grit.
Cool. Book. You got any book recommendations?
Yeah, I got a lot of them. Relentless by Tim Grover is a great one, and he's been kind of making appearances on those episodes too. He was Michael Jordan's trainer, Kobe Bryant, worked with Dwayne Wade. That's a really great one, especially going back to the mindset mentality side of things. Angela Duckworth actually has a book called Grit. That's another really good one, kind of going along the same lines of what we're talking about here. And I know a lot of people love this book out there. Toughness by Jay Billis is another one of my favorites. Those are three great ones for coaches, trainers, athletes, everything in between.
Awesome. And if people want to find out more information about, if they're in the Indy area, about competitive greatness, how can people get in touch?
Yeah, we're really active on social media. So it's at C Greatness Train, which is the letter C, Greatness Train. That's probably the best way to get a hold of us. We do a ton of stuff all over the state of Indiana, really across the country. We run camps and clinics all over the place. But, we're really active here in Indianapolis, especially on the northeast side. We do some stuff up in South Bend, really pretty much anywhere, we have pockets of athletes. So social media is probably the best way to kind of stay in touch with, what we're currently doing and what we're going to be about down the road.
Tell us a little bit about your experience so far at Chatard. I mean, being back at Chatard, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was a great first year. I could not have asked for a better group to kind of start with. The nice part was that, I took a year off because the training stuff got busy and I had some guys pursuing the MBA that I was traveling across the country to work with. But the prior year to that, I spent 2 years as an assistant coach. So a lot of these guys who were juniors and seniors, I actually had coached, as the JV head coach at the time. Some of the kids that are in the program now were kids that I worked with within competitive greatness as they were in middle school. And so there was kind of already a built-in trust level, if you want to call it that. But as most people probably know, as a trainer, you're everybody's best advocate. You obviously push them and try to hold them to a high standard, but you're not deciding on playing time. So when you become coach and you start deciding on minutes and who comes in and out of games, that changes a little bit. But it was a great first year. Chatard's always been known for football, tough, hard-nosed, kind of punch you in the mouth, play tough, have a few shooters spotted up on the perimeter, but we're always really small and undersized, and that didn't change at all this year. So, we ended up winning 15 games, 15-9, which was the first time in like 13 years, and I think only the second time in 25, which was great. But we fell a little bit short. We wanted to win the sectional, obviously wanted to advance in the state tournament, but I'm really looking forward to kind of continuing to build, what we've got going on with some of those younger guys.
What did your summer look like heading into before all this happened? You coach in the summers usually, right?
I do, yeah. So Gordon Hayward started a team a few years back. It was originally Nike sponsored. The goal was kind of to get on the EYBL, which he had relationships with those guys, but then he ended up signing with Anta, so that kind of went out the window. But it's a pretty good group of guys. We've got a lot of NAI Division II, a few guys that are at that Division I level, and we're one of those teams that's not on any of the circuits, but when we compete, like we went down to Birmingham last summer and competed in that Adidas Summer Championships and did really well. So we compete with a lot of those circuit teams at a pretty high level. And this was going to be, so it's the class of 2021. Unfortunately for them, this is kind of the big summer for them from a recruiting standpoint. So I'm hopeful that, things, obviously the NCAA started to announce that they may push back or are pushing back that dead period throughout the whole month of July. So the hope would be that maybe they start to recoup some of those recruiting periods in August or September. I don't know if that's going to happen, but my hope is that I can get back with those guys at least for one more run, even if it's not playing in front of a ton of Division I, Division II coaches, playing in front of NAI, Division III, and at least getting back together and hopefully getting back to some sort of normalcy out of this, pandemic.
So what does it look like for you as far as training or keeping in contact with your players, whether it's, the AAU kids or the high school kids? How does that work for you?
So it's a lot of this Zoom stuff. It's a lot of email stuff. We've tried to keep, our high school guys active with workouts each week that we're sending them to do. Obviously, it's tough because everybody's got varying degrees of, equipment they've got access to. It's been unprecedentedly cold even in May. So, it's just been tough for guys to get the work in that they typically do. And really for our our college and pro guys, it's been really hard because they, that's their livelihood, or for college guys, a lot of them like for it to be their livelihood down the road. And, they're really itching to get back in the gym. Obviously, we're all trying to be smart and be safe. But I know as soon as we're allowed to get back together with all the safety precautions that we'll put into place, we're definitely going to be doing that, just because, this is usually the most fun time of year for me because we've got so many guys back in town. And, a lot of these guys become like younger brothers to you. I always laugh because when they go back to college or the pros, my mom, literally every time she came down to Bloomington, she's only an hour and a half away, and she would cry like crazy every single time, all 200-300 times she visited, every single time she cried. And so now I'm starting to kind of get the same feeling that she used to have when all those guys go back to school. So it's been kind of tough because usually this would be a really fun time of year where the gym's packed, high energy, kind of going 24/7 with workouts, but, kind of hoping and praying that we can get back to that here soon.
I thought I had one more question written down here while you were talking. How everyone does form shooting differently. How do you do form shooting? Or define that for you.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people do it one-handed. I've always done it two-handed. Now there's a benefit, at least in my opinion, to kind of getting your hand placement right. So starting it here and getting it here. But I've just always been a proponent of both hands just because that's how you shoot it. But we usually go all three sides of the basket. So right side, left side, front of the rim. And I usually start on the right or left. Depends on the athlete, depends on the group, how much time you have. But, we swoosh around the rim. So for our highest level athletes, it's usually 5 swishes at each of those 3 spots, but you end up at the front of the rim. And then once you swish those 5 at the front, you take a big step back. Now you make 5. And then with each step back, you make 5 more until you get to the free throw line, make 5 free throws or 10. And then you kind of get into the workout from there. So could be 3, could be 2, could be 5, but that's kind of the way that we approach our form shooting. And then we always end our workouts with what I call, obviously, reverse form shooting. So start at the free throw line and work your way back in the same way.
Okay. Awesome. Jeff, did you think of any more questions as we were going over?
I didn't. It was great. I learned a lot.
I appreciate you guys having me on. I've had fun with it.
Yeah, this was great. Like I said, when I can get out there and get back down, I've been telling everybody this, when I can get to any city, when we can get out of Blair, I'm going to swing by the gym. So
I love it. Whenever you want to come by, you guys are always welcome.
All right. Thanks. We'll talk soon.
No problem. Thank you guys.
If